Ever felt that prickle on the back of your neck when you're alone in the dark? That feeling that you're being watched? Tonight, we're diving deep into those moments. These aren't stories from a book. These are 5 real, chilling encounters that happened under the cloak of night. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. Our first story comes from a long-haul truck driver named Mark, who often drives through the desolate highways of the American Southwest. One night, deep in the Arizona desert, his truck's engine sputtered and died. No cell service, miles from the nearest town. As he worked on the engine under the glow of his flashlight, he heard something. A soft, rhythmic tapping on the side of his trailer. He called out, thinking it was another stranded driver. Silence. He went back to work, and the tapping started again, closer this time. He grabbed a heavy wrench and slowly walked around the rig. The moonlight revealed nothing but sand and cactus. But then, he saw them. Footprints in the dust circling his truck. But they weren't human. They were long, slender, and had too many toes. Mark scrambled back into his cab, locked the doors, and spent the entire night listening to that incessant light tapping, circling his truck until the first light of dawn, when it just stopped. He never found out what was out there. Next, we head to a quiet suburban neighborhood. This story is from a college student, Clara, who was house-sitting for a family friend. The house was old but charming, with big windows overlooking a dense patch of woods. The first few nights were peaceful. On the third night, she was jolted awake around 3 a.m. by the family dog, a golden retriever, growling low in its throat at the living room window. Clara tried to calm the dog, but it wouldn't stop, its hackles raised. She peered out the window but saw only darkness. She assumed it was a raccoon and went back to bed. The next night, it happened again. This time, as she looked out, she saw a flicker of movement at the edge of the woods. A tall, unnaturally thin figure was standing there, just beyond the reach of the porch light. It was completely still, almost like a statue. A cold dread washed over her. She quickly closed the curtains and spent the rest of the night huddled on the sofa with the dog. For the rest of her stay, she never looked out that window after dark again. Our third encounter takes us to the Appalachian Mountains. 2 friends, Liam and Ben, were on a multi-day hiking trip. They were experienced campers and had set up their tent deep in the wilderness. As they sat by the campfire, the usual forest sounds, crickets, the rustle of leaves, were suddenly replaced by an unnerving silence. Every insect, every animal, just went quiet. Then they heard a voice, a faint, high-pitched whisper that seemed to come from all directions at once. It sounded like a woman, but the words were garbled, nonsensical. Ben, a bit of a skeptic, shouted into the darkness, telling whoever it was to stop messing around. The whispering stopped. A few minutes later, they heard a piercing shriek that echoed through the valley. It wasn't human, and it wasn't any animal they recognized. They frantically doused their fire, zipped themselves into their tent, and didn't make a sound until sunrise. They packed up and hiked out that morning, cutting their trip short, feeling like they were being watched the entire way back to the trailhead. Now for a story that hits a little closer to home for many of us. This happened to a young nurse named Sarah, working a late shift at an old understaffed hospital. Her floor was mostly empty that night, except for one elderly patient in a room at the far end of the hall. Around 2 a.m., the call light for an empty room, room 308, lit up. Confused, Sarah went to check, finding the room completely empty, just as she'd left it. She reset the light and went back to the nurse's station. 10 minutes later, it lit up again. This time, as she walked down the long, dim hallway, she heard a faint, rasping breath coming from inside room 308. Her heart hammered in her chest. She pushed the door open, flashlight ready, and found nothing. The room was cold, still, and empty. Shaken, she told an older, more experienced nurse what had happened. The older nurse just nodded grimly and said, "Oh, that's just Mr. Abernathy. He passed away in that room a year ago. He just gets a bit restless sometimes." Sarah requested a transfer to the day shift the very next day. Our final story is perhaps the most unsettling. It comes from a group of friends who decided to explore an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of their town, a place notorious for its grim history. Armed with flashlights, they ventured inside. The air was thick with the smell of decay and dust. As they explored the patient wards, one of them, named Josh, started feeling dizzy and unwell. His friends thought he was just spooked, but then he began speaking in a strange, guttural voice, saying things that made no sense. He claimed his name was Silas, and that the doctors had locked him in the walls. The others, now terrified, tried to lead him out, but he resisted, pointing to a bricked-up section of a wall in the basement. Suddenly, Josh collapsed. When he came to moments later, he had no memory of the past hour. The friends fled the asylum and never spoke of it again. But for weeks afterward, Josh suffered from terrible nightmares, all of them ending with the sound of someone scratching from behind a brick wall. And there you have it. 5 chilling, real-life encounters with the unknown. These stories remind us that sometimes the most terrifying things aren't on a movie screen, but waiting just outside our window, down a dark hallway, or deep in the silent woods. What we can't explain is often what frightens us the most. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the dark. If you have your own spooky story to share, leave it in the comments below. I'd love to read it. Don't forget to like this video if it gave you chills, and subscribe for more dives into the unexplained. Stay safe, and maybe leave a light on tonight.